On Father's Day, my daughter gave me a $2 lottery ticket and gave her father-in-law a $13,000 cruise. What followed was the most shocking family betrayal you will ever hear. I should have seen it coming, but betrayal rarely arrives with flashing lights. It comes dressed as love wrapped in laughter, delivered at the very table where you expect warmth. That Sunday afternoon, the curtains of my modest Ohio home filtered sunlight across the dining table I had carefully set. Forks, knives, the familiar coffee mugs, a simple roast chicken I had spent the morning preparing. Every detail was meant to say family. Instead, what I received was humiliation. Lauren, my only daughter, leaned back in her chair, with that smirk that once seemed playful, now sharp as glass. She tossed a crumpled piece of paper across the table. "Here you go, Dad. Happy Father's Day. If you win, remember half is mine." The paper landed in front of me with all the weight of an insult. My hands, weathered from decades under car hoods, smoothed it against the tablecloth. A Powerball ticket. $2. I forced a smile, but inside my heart was boiling. Years of late nights, double shifts, and overtime had built the very foundation of the life she lived. I thought of the ice cream cones I used to buy her when she was 7, those same $2, lighting up her face. Now those same dollars were being used to mock me. Then came the twist that left the room frozen. "Oh, wait," Lauren chirped, her voice rising with theatrical delight. "I still have Eric's gift." She reached under the table and pulled out an elegant silk-lined box. The ribbon shimmered under my cheap ceiling light, the kind of ribbon that cost more than my week's groceries. She handed it to Walter Briggs, her father-in-law, with a reverence she had never shown me. Inside were 2 first-class cruise tickets to the Mediterranean. Cost $13,000. Paid for, I would later discover, with my own money. The dining room went silent except for Walter's satisfied chuckle. He held the golden tickets like they were proof of his superiority. "Now this," he said, "is a proper gift." His manicured fingers tapped the embossed lettering, his eyes glancing across the table to meet mine. "Your father taught you well." I sat there holding a $2 joke while my daughter praised another man as though he were her true father. Around the table, faces turned downward, forks stalled in midair, no one daring to meet my eyes. The air was thick with unspoken judgment. That was the moment I knew something had shattered. This wasn't just a Father's Day gift. This was a declaration, a message that my sacrifices, my love, my decades of grinding work meant nothing. What I held in my hand was not a lottery ticket, it was a symbol of betrayal. And yet what none of them knew was that this little piece of paper, this so-called joke, would become the weapon of a lifetime. This wasn't just a family betrayal. This was the beginning of a revenge story, a betrayal twist so unbelievable that you'll question how far blood can go before it turns cold. The morning after that Father's Day humiliation, I sat in my kitchen with the same ritual I had followed for 40 years. A mug of coffee, a careful review of my monthly bank statement, the quiet discipline of a man who had worked every hour of his life to make sure no bill ever went unpaid. My hands moved down the list of transactions, steady practiced utilities, groceries, the modest ingredients I had bought for dinner. But then my finger stopped cold. One line glared back at me: premium travel services, $13,672. My coffee went bitter in my mouth. I blinked once, twice, but the numbers did not change. The date was circled in my mind instantly 1 week earlier, a Thursday. I had not been anywhere near a travel agency. My heart sank as the truth clicked into place. Lauren, my daughter, still had access to my account, a precaution I had set up after her mother's death, a detail I had forgotten in the haze of grief and years of misplaced trust. And now she had used that access to steal more than $13,000 from me to buy that extravagant cruise for her father-in-law. The humiliation from the dinner table was suddenly a knife twisting deeper, because now I knew it wasn't just a thoughtless joke or a cruel display. It had been financed by my own sweat, my own sacrifices. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone, dialing her number. Each ring pounded in my chest like a drumbeat. When she answered, her voice carried that bored politeness she always used when I interrupted her busy life. "Hello, Dad." I forced my voice to stay even though anger cracked beneath it. "Lauren, I'm looking at my bank statement. There's a charge for over $13,000 from premium travel services." There was a pause, then a laugh. Not nervous, not apologetic, a laugh light and dismissive. Oh, that. I bought Dad Charlie his cruise. He deserves something nice for once. My blood ran cold. You took $13,000 from my account without asking. She sighed, sharp as broken glass. I didn't take anything, Dad. I used family money for a family gift. Family money. The phrase was a gunshot. I had worked 60-hour weeks in a hot garage rebuilding engines, breaking my back under cars, skipping meals, wearing the same pair of boots until the soles gave out, all to pay for her college, to give her the kind of life she wanted. And now she called it family money, as if it had simply been lying there waiting for her to claim it. My voice cracked, breaking on the word. That's theft, Lauren. You stole from me. But she snapped back instantly, her tone shifting to something sharper. It's not stealing when it's family money. Eric has always been there for us financially. He helped us buy our house, paid for Ethan's private school, even covers our country club membership. This is just returning the favor. I gripped the phone tighter, the plastic creaking under my fingers. I'm your father, Lauren. I raised you. I worked double shifts to pay for your textbooks. I skipped sleep to keep the lights on. And you call that just family money? She interrupted before I could continue, her voice dripping with disdain. Eric has shown us what real success looks like, what generosity means. You just hoard money like a miser. Some people live, Dad. Some people give. Her words sliced me open. To her, my decades of sacrifice, the grease-stained shirts, the aching muscles, the broken nights of sleep weren't generosity. They were nothing more than a father doing the bare minimum. Eric, the man she had known for less than a decade, was her example of true family. My jaw clenched, but my voice fell to a whisper. And what about everything I've done? Silence, cold and deliberate, stretched across the line before she answered with the cruelty of a stranger. You did what fathers are supposed to do. Eric went above and beyond. The line went dead. I sat at my kitchen table, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone echo like a funeral bell. My hands shook as I set it down, those same hands that had held her as a baby, taught her to ride a bike, applauded at her graduation. Now they held nothing but betrayal. In that moment, I understood that this wasn't about money. It was about erasure. This was the moment my daughter erased me from her life, declaring another man her true father, while treating me as nothing more than an ATM. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the quiet kitchen around me. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier, the pictures of her childhood on the wall mocking me with memories of a girl who no longer existed. The little girl who once clutched $2 for ice cream now believed she was entitled to $13,000 stolen from me. This was more than theft. It was a family betrayal, the kind of betrayal twist that crushes a father's soul. And in that silence, as my heart burned, I knew one thing: this was the beginning of a revenge story, whether I wanted it or not. When I thought the betrayal could sink no lower, it found a new stage: social media. Within days of our fight, Lauren and Charlie turned what should have been a private wound into public theater. I logged into Facebook one morning and nearly dropped my coffee. There she was, my daughter, posting a picture of herself with red-rimmed eyes, her head resting dramatically against Charlie's shoulder. The caption stung like acid. Hardest week of my life. After everything I've done for my father, he cut me off and humiliated me. Sometimes family betrayal hurts more than words can explain. By noon, her post had 50 likes and a flood of sympathetic comments. Friends wrote things like, "Stay strong. Lauren, you're such a good daughter, and your dad must be going through something. No one who knows you could ever believe you'd do wrong." Each line was a nail in the coffin of my reputation. The woman who had stolen from me now painted herself as the victim of a cruel, paranoid old man. Charlie wasn't far behind. On his LinkedIn, he shared a long essay cloaked in corporate politeness. It is devastating to watch financial elder abuse unfold in reverse. When elderly individuals become consumed by money, they sometimes forget the loyalty and support their children gave them. My wife is heartbroken by her father's obsession. All we ever wanted was to share blessings as a family. The comments from his professional network rolled in quickly. Investment managers, old college buddies, people who had never met me, but who were suddenly authorities on my character. "Proud of you, Charlie, for standing up for family values," one colleague wrote. "So sorry your family's going through this. Money changes people. No one asked for my side. No one wanted to know the truth." In the grocery store, I felt the eyes on me. Mrs. Langford, who had waved to me every morning from her garden for 20 years, suddenly looked away when I passed. At church, handshakes felt limp, conversations cut short. On the Nextdoor app, threads appeared with titles like, "What's going on with the Carters?" People speculated that I had gone senile, that maybe I was hoarding money, that perhaps Lauren was only trying to help. The cruelest twist of family betrayal is not the private wound, it's the public shaming that follows. Everywhere I turned, I was the villain. Lauren posted photos of Ethan, my grandson, hugging Charlie with captions like, "Thankful for a real father figure who always shows up." Those words weren't meant for the world, they were meant for me. Each photo, each caption was another dagger telling me that not only had she stolen from me, but she was working to erase me completely. In her carefully curated narrative, I wasn't a man who had worked 60 hours a week to pay for her education. I was a miser, an obstacle, a shadow in the background of her happy family. I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to comment under every lie to tell everyone that the cruise tickets had been bought with my stolen savings, that the lottery ticket she mocked me with had been purchased on my dime. But I stayed silent. Part of me hoped that silence would preserve dignity, that maybe truth would surface on its own. Instead, silence became another weapon in her hands. People saw my lack of defense as proof. The betrayal twist was complete. The guilty became innocent, and the innocent became guilty. Even my own sister Helen called, her voice heavy with hesitation. "Raymond," she said, "Lauren called me. She says you accused her of stealing, but maybe it was just a misunderstanding. You know how money confuses people." I closed my eyes, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. Helen, she admitted it. She said it wasn't stealing because it was family money. She said Eric was the real example of success, and she broadcasted it for the world to see. There was silence on the line then, a sigh that told me she wanted to believe me, but couldn't ignore the tide of public opinion. That night, scrolling through the endless comments, I felt as though I had stepped into an alternate reality where truth had no value. Friends from years ago chimed in, neighbors piled on, and strangers judged me based on one-sided stories. I was no longer Raymond Carter, father, mechanic, widower. I was a caricature, the greedy old man who stole from his daughter. And that is the deepest cut of all, when family betrayal is not just personal, but when it rewrites your very identity in the eyes of the community. I put down my phone and stared at the quiet house around me, the photos of Lauren as a child grinning from the walls. She had rewritten me online, but here the truth lingered. The girl in those photos used to run into my arms, her face bright at the sight of me. Now that same girl had turned her followers into an army weaponizing sympathy to destroy her own father. Betrayal wasn't enough, she needed erasure. And as I sat there in the flickering glow of the screen, I realized this wasn't just a private family matter anymore. This was a revenge story in the making, one where the villain wore a mask of virtue and the father was left to carry the weight of silence. There are nights when the house feels louder in its silence than any storm outside. That was the night after Lauren's posts spread like wildfire. I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the faded pictures on the wall, each frame a reminder of a life I thought I had built on love. One photo showed Lauren at 6 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, cotton candy sticking to her cheeks as she laughed with the kind of joy only a child can carry. Another showed her on her high school graduation day, the gown hanging awkwardly on her frame, my hand proud on her shoulder, tears hidden behind my sunglasses. Each image hit me like a hammer, because in every one of them, I saw a father who had given everything. And yet somehow in her eyes now, that was worth nothing. I remembered the long nights at the garage, engines spread out in pieces across greasy floors, my hands blackened with oil, and cuts that never quite healed. 16-hour shifts were not the exception. They were the rule. I worked weekends, holidays, even skipped sleep because every extra dollar meant another textbook, another semester's tuition, another chance to give my daughter a life free from the struggles that had defined mine. I used to come home so exhausted I'd collapse in the recliner without even changing out of my work clothes. But I'd still wake up when she tiptoed into the living room, curl up in my lap and whisper, "You're my hero, Dad." That whisper carried me through years of exhaustion. And now, she said Eric, her husband, was the one who showed her what success and generosity looked like. Family betrayal cuts deepest when it rewrites the very memories that once gave you strength. To her, my sacrifices were no longer sacrifices. They were obligations, nothing more than what a father was supposed to do. She erased the love behind it, erased the pride, erased me. The betrayal wasn't just about the money, though the theft stung. It was about the message that love without luxury wasn't real, that devotion without dollars wasn't enough. In her world now, love had to be dressed in expensive cruises, private school tuition, and country club memberships. The $2 ice creams that once made her beam forgotten. The rusty old Chevy I rebuilt for her 16th birthday, spending weeks on my knees in the cold garage so she'd have a car of her own forgotten. The nights I stayed up with her after her mother died, holding her while she cried until she fell asleep on my chest. Forgotten. And so I asked myself the question that haunts every parent who finds themselves erased by their own child. When did my love stop being enough? I thought of the lottery ticket again, the cheap slip of paper she had tossed at me with a smirk. To her, it was a joke, a way to underline that I was small, outdated, insignificant. But to me, it became a symbol of everything. That $2 ticket was the exact price I used to keep in my pocket every Friday, so she could run to the ice cream truck, her smile wide as she clutched her treat. Back then, $2 was magic. Now $2 was mockery. That was the betrayal twist. The very things that had once symbolized love now symbolized contempt. I poured another cup of coffee that night, though it had gone cold before I touched it. My reflection in the kitchen window looked older than I remembered, lines, deeper eyes, darker. But behind that tired face was a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If my daughter could take $13,000 from me without guilt, if she could smear me online without hesitation, if she could erase decades of sacrifice with a single cruel phrase, then the bond I thought unbreakable had already been shattered. I whispered to the empty house, maybe to her ghost, maybe to the little girl she used to be, I gave you everything. And somehow it wasn't enough. The silence that answered was heavier than words. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dim glow of the kitchen lamp, cycling through memories of scraped knees I had bandaged birthdays. I had saved months to afford milestones I had cheered for. Each memory felt like a knife now, because every one of them was dismissed by the woman she had become. She had traded a lifetime of love for a narrative of luxury, traded her father for a man who bought her comfort. And I was left holding the truth. My daughter's love had been conditional all along, and I had been blind to it. As dawn crept through the curtains, one thought hardened in my chest. This was no longer just grief. This was the beginning of resolve. If love had been erased, if memory had been rewritten, then I would find my dignity in a new story. This was no longer just a tragedy. This was the seed of a revenge story. The morning after another sleepless night, I picked up the phone and dialed my bank. My voice shook, but not with fear. This time it was anger hardening into resolve. I need to revoke authorized access to my account, I told the representative. For years, Lauren had been listed as an emergency contact, a precaution after her mother's death. I had never thought twice about it, but now that trust had become a weapon in her hands. Within 15 minutes, her access was gone. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of control. Yet even that victory felt small, because the reality was heavier. She had already stolen from me, and worse, she had stolen my dignity. I tried to distract myself with the television that evening, flipping through channels I wasn't really watching, a cooking show, a sitcom I had seen 100 times. News about gas prices rising again, then the screen cut to the Ohio Lottery Powerball drawing. The announcer's voice carried the kind of cheerful authority that made me pause. Tonight's jackpot is $120 million. And here are the winning numbers: 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, and the Powerball is 18. My hand froze on the remote. My breath caught in my throat. Those numbers, I had seen them before. I whispered them aloud, my voice cracking. 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, Powerball, 18. The memory hit like lightning. That ticket, the $2 joke Lauren had tossed at me across the Father's Day table. The slip of paper I had crumpled in disgust and thrown into the kitchen trash. My legs carried me to the garbage can before my mind caught up. I pulled out the bag, digging past coffee grounds and food wrappers until my fingers found it stained, wrinkled but still legible. I smoothed it against the counter, my heart hammering like it wanted to break free of my chest. The numbers stared back at me, perfect in their alignment. Every single one matched. I sat down hard in my chair, the room spinning around me. The ticket worth $2 yesterday was worth $120 million today. a betrayal twist so wild it felt like fiction. The very slip of paper she had mocked me with, bought with money she stole, was now the key to everything. The next morning, I drove to the Lottery Commission office in Columbus. The building was sleek glass and steel buzzing, with a kind of serious energy you only find in places that deal with dreams and reality colliding. I clutched the ticket inside a plastic sleeve, terrified of losing it, terrified of even breathing on it. At the front desk, a woman named Angela Torres took it with professional calm. She placed it under a scanner, nodded, and looked at me with a small smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. The ticket is valid. Verification will take 48 hours, but this is the winning ticket." My knees nearly buckled. For decades, I had lived paycheck to paycheck, careful discipline, and now I was sitting on a fortune that could rebuild or destroy everything. I drove home in a haze, gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to. My neighborhood looked the same, Mrs. Langford pruning her roses, kids riding bikes the corner market with Mr. Romano stacking fruit in his window. But everything felt different. They didn't know yet. No one knew. And part of me wanted to keep it that way forever, just to savor the power of a secret that could undo all the lies Lauren and Charlie had spread about me. But fate had another plan. 2 days later, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was smooth measured. "Mr. Carter, this is Walter Briggs. We need to talk." Walter, Charlie's father, a man of wealth and reputation, someone I had always assumed looked down on me. "What could we possibly have to discuss?" I asked. His reply was simple: the lottery ticket, and what I witnessed on Father's Day. I met him at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street, a place he would never normally set foot in. He sat in a booth wearing a navy suit that didn't belong among checkered floors and bottomless coffee. He shook my hand, firm and deliberate. "I saw it all, Raymond," he said. "Your daughter tossed you that ticket. She called it a gift. There was no agreement, no deal, no conditions. It was yours, and the campaign they're running online. It's a lie." I studied him, searching for the trap, but there was none. His eyes were clear, his voice steady. That moment, a weight lifted from my chest, because I finally had more than just a winning ticket. I had a witness, a man of standing, who could cut through the lies with truth. For the first time in weeks, hope began to stir in me again. The betrayal had started with a $2 ticket. The revenge would begin with 120 million. And now I wasn't alone. The morning of the ceremony felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I had been invited to the Ohio Lottery headquarters in Columbus for the official check presentation. They told me it would be public with television cameras and reporters from every outlet in the state. Part of me wanted to decline to take the money quietly, but another part knew this was my chance to reclaim the dignity my own daughter had stolen from me. For weeks, Lauren and Charlie had poisoned my reputation, painting me as greedy, cruel, obsessed with money. Now, for the first time, I had both the ticket and the truth. I wore the same navy suit I had put on 8 years earlier for my wife's funeral. The fabric was a little tighter now, the tie slightly frayed, but it was the best I had. As I walked into the lobby, bright lights from the media setup hit me. There was a backdrop with the Ohio Lottery logo, oversized checks leaning against the wall, and officials bustling around with clipboards. My name was whispered among the crowd, some voices curious, some skeptical, some even hostile. Angela Torres from the Lottery Commission greeted me with a professional smile. "Mr. Carter, are you ready?" I nodded, though my throat was dry. "As ready as I'll ever be." She led me to the stage where cameras immediately flashed. The room was buzzing, microphones pointed at me from every angle. Angela's voice rang out calm and clear. "Today we are pleased to present the $120 million Powerball jackpot to Mr. Raymond Carter of Columbus, Ohio." Applause filled the room, though it felt distant. I took the oversized check in my hands, the numbers printed so large they almost mocked the weight of it. And then chaos. From the back of the room, a voice cut through the noise. "Stop, that ticket belongs to me." I turned and saw Lauren pushing through the crowd, Charlie on her heels. My daughter dressed in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, her face flushed with anger and desperation. "Everyone here needs to know the truth," she shouted, pointing at me with shaking hands. "That lottery ticket was mine. I gave it to him as a joke, but we agreed half the winnings are mine." Gas rippled through the room. Reporters swiveled their cameras. Microphones were thrust forward. Suddenly, the focus was no longer on the oversized check in my hands. It was on the accusation hanging in the air. I steadied myself at the podium. My voice, calm but firm, echoed across the room. The ticket was a Father's Day gift from my daughter. She tossed it to me across my own table. A gift belongs to the person who receives it. There was no agreement, no condition. It was mine. Lauren's voice cracked with fury. You're lying. Everyone at that dinner heard me say half was mine. Ask anyone, they'll tell you. And then, like a script written by fate, Walter Briggs stood from the audience. His presence alone silenced half the room. A man of wealth, reputation, and authority, dressed as though he were heading into a board meeting instead of a lottery ceremony. He stepped forward, his voice carrying the kind of weight you can't buy. I was there, he said. The crowd turned, cameras adjusting to capture his face. I sat at that table on Father's Day. I saw Lauren toss the ticket across the table. She said, "Here you go, Dad. Happy Father's Day." She called it a gift. There was no agreement, no negotiation, no sharing. That ticket belonged to Raymond Carter the moment it left her hand. The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, flashes going off like lightning. Lauren froze, her mouth opening and closing without words. Charlie tried to step forward, but Walter's glare stopped him in his tracks. And another thing, Walter added, his tone sharp. The campaign they've been running on social media is based on lies. Raymond has been humiliated by his own daughter's betrayal. Enough is enough. For the first time in months, I felt the air shift in my favor. Reporters who had once eyed me with suspicion now leaned toward Walter, scribbling his every word. Cameras caught Lauren's trembling lip, Charlie's flushed face. The truth was out, not whispered in kitchens or argued over phone calls, but broadcast live for everyone to see. The betrayal twist had finally flipped. The man they painted as greedy was vindicated. The daughter who claimed virtue was exposed. I tightened my grip on the oversized check, looked out into the sea of flashing cameras, and spoke the words I had been waiting to say. This wasn't about money. This was about respect, about love, and about betrayal. What you've witnessed here is not a lottery winner's story. It's a family betrayal that nearly erased me. But truth has a way of surfacing. The crowd buzzed, questions flying, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I stood tall, my dignity intact. Lauren was escorted out by security, her voice hoarse as she screamed about lawsuits and fairness. Charlie followed, his hand gripping her arm as though he could contain the wreckage. Walter gave me a nod, firm and steady, before returning to his seat. And me, I held the check high for the cameras, not as a symbol of wealth, but as proof that justice, even in the face of family betrayal, can still prevail. The day after the ceremony, the newspaper sat on my kitchen table, the headline blaring my name alongside the words "lottery winner." For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of vindication. The truth had been spoken. The world had seen my daughter's lies collapse under the steady testimony of Walter Briggs. I thought perhaps the storm was finally over. But family betrayal never ends with applause and oversized checks. It comes back dressed in tears, knocking softly on the very door it once slammed shut. That afternoon, I heard a car door outside. I peered through the window and saw Lauren walking up the driveway. Shoulders slumped, makeup smudged, a far cry from the glamorous woman who had stormed the lottery ceremony the day before. For a moment, my heart stuttered. Some foolish part of me wanted to believe she was here to apologize, to return to the little girl who used to call me her hero. The knock at my door was soft, hesitant. I opened it and she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Dad," she whispered, "can we talk?" I let her in. She sat on the edge of my couch like a child waiting for discipline, her hands twisting in her lap. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I'm so sorry about yesterday. I lost control. I didn't mean to humiliate you. I was scared." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and for a moment I saw the teenager who had cried in my arms the night her mother died. But then the story began to unfold, and it was practiced, too practiced. Eric and I were in trouble. The mortgage, the credit cards, his business, it's all collapsing. We owe almost $400,000. The bank is breathing down our necks. We're about to lose the house. She paused, letting the weight of the words hang in the air, before delivering the ask. "Dad, if you could just help us with $2 million, that would solve everything. You'd still have over $100 million left. It's nothing to you, but it would save our lives. $2 million. She said it like she was asking for bus fare. I stared at her, my mind flashing through decades of sacrifice. $2 million was 40 years of my sweat and labor, 40 years of greasy hands and aching backs, 40 years of missing dinners and collapsing into a chair too tired to move. And she tossed it into the air like it was spare change. I kept my voice calm, though inside it shook with a storm. Lauren, you stole $13,000 from my account without asking. You humiliated me in front of our family, in front of the entire community. You smeared me on social media, called me greedy, painted me as a monster. And now, because your life of luxury is falling apart, you want me to reward that behavior with $2 million. Her tears dried in an instant. The softness on her face hardened into steel. The performance slipped away, revealing the truth beneath. So that's it, she snapped, standing abruptly. You're really going to let your own daughter lose her house while you sit on piles of money. You're really going to watch your grandson get ripped out of his school because you're too stubborn to help. I rose to my feet, my voice quiet but steady. I love you, Lauren, but I will not enable you anymore. You need to learn to solve your own problems. Her eyes flashed with something darker than disappointment. It was rage. Fine, she spat. But don't expect to see Ethan again. Don't expect Christmas visits, birthday calls, graduation invitations. You're cutting yourself out of this family, Dad. Remember that when you're dying, alone in this house. The words landed like knives, but I didn't flinch. I had already been bleeding for weeks. I simply nodded. If that's your choice, I'll have to accept it. For a moment, shock flickered across her face, as though she hadn't expected me to stand firm. Then she turned, storming out the door, her heels pounding against the hardwood like gunshots. I stood at the window as she marched to her car, her tires squealing as she peeled out of the driveway. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was clean, like a wound cauterized. My daughter had revealed her true self, not a victim, not a misunderstood woman, but a manipulator who weaponized love to get what she wanted. This was the final betrayal twist. She didn't come for reconciliation. She came for ransom. And when denied, she tried to erase me one last time. I turned back into my house, the newspaper headline still on the table. Lottery winner. But in that moment, I realized the money wasn't the story. The story was survival, dignity, and the clarity that comes when betrayal strips away illusions. This was no longer just a family betrayal. This was the closing act of a revenge story, and for the first time I felt free. When the dust of the ceremony began to settle, I thought perhaps my world would remain fractured forever. But sometimes healing doesn't come in the way you expect. Sometimes it arrives quietly through voices you never thought would stand beside you. A week after the public chaos, I opened my laptop one morning and found myself staring at a long post that had already gone viral in our community. It was from Walter Briggs. The title alone made my heart pound. A witness speaks the truth about the Carter lottery story. He wrote with the measured tone of a businessman, but the words carried the weight of judgment and integrity. He described the Father's Day dinner in precise detail, how Lauren tossed the ticket across the table, how she called it a gift, how there had been no discussion of splitting winnings. He condemned the smear campaign they had unleashed against me, calling it cruel and dishonest. And then he ended with words I never expected from the father of my son-in-law. Raymond Carter is the rightful owner of the ticket. His daughter's attempt to destroy his reputation is not only false, but shameful. I cannot stay silent while a good man's character is shredded for greed. Reading those words, I felt something shift inside me. For weeks, I had been the villain in everyone's eyes. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. Church friends whispered in corners. Even my sister Helen hesitated to defend me. But here was Walter, a man of status and respect, standing publicly on my side. Within hours, his posts spread through local groups, shared hundreds of times, commented on by people who had once believed Lauren's lies. This changes everything. If Walter Briggs says it, it must be true. Maybe we judged too quickly. The tide that had once drowned me was slowly turning. The changes started small. At the grocery store, Mr. Romano, who had once avoided eye contact, greeted me with a warm smile again, slipping an extra apple into my bag. Mrs. Langford, the neighbor who had looked away in her rose garden, waved at me once more and even stopped to chat about the weather. I read Walter's post, she admitted. I'm sorry for believing the worst. People forget that social media doesn't always tell the truth. Each little gesture was a stitch in the torn fabric of my dignity. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it began to heal the public wounds that had made me feel like a stranger in my own town. But the moment that struck deepest came late one evening. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me decided to answer. On the other end was a soft, hesitant voice. "Grandpa, it's Ethan." My throat tightened at the sound of my grandson. "Ethan, are you okay?" There was a pause, then a whisper. "Mom doesn't know I'm calling. I miss you." My eyes filled with tears I hadn't allowed myself in months. I wanted to tell him everything to explain the lies, the cruelty, the betrayal, but I kept my words gentle. "I miss you too, buddy, more than anything." He told me about school, about baseball practice, about a science project he was working on. For 10 minutes, it felt like nothing had changed. The world of lies, lawsuits, and betrayal fell away, replaced by the innocent voice of a boy who still saw me as his grandfather. Before he hung up, he whispered something that nearly broke me. "I know you didn't do anything wrong, Grandpa. Mom says stuff, but I don't believe it. You're still my hero." When the line went dead, I sat in the quiet house, clutching the phone as though it were a lifeline. That was the real betrayal twist. No matter how much Lauren tried to erase me, the bond between a grandfather and grandson survived. Walter's public defense, the neighbor's small gestures, Ethan's secret call, they were not reconciliation in the traditional sense. Lauren remained distant, consumed by her pride and rage. But these indirect moments of grace reminded me that I was not alone, that the truth had roots even in poisoned soil. Healing didn't mean my daughter would suddenly return to me. Healing meant I could stand tall with my dignity intact, supported by the unexpected voices who had chosen honesty over lies. And in that realization, I found a quiet kind of peace. This family betrayal had tried to erase me, but it failed. The revenge story wasn't just about money or winning. It was about survival, about holding on to love, where it still existed, and about finding allies in the unlikeliest of places. When the storm finally passed, I packed up my house and drove 2 hours west to Dayton. The streets were quieter, the neighbors less curious, the air lighter somehow. There on the corner of a side street, I found a garage that had been sitting for sale. The sign above it was faded, but the bones were strong. Henderson's Auto Repair had once been a staple of the community, and as I walked through its dusty bays, the smell of oil and old engines filled my lungs. I knew immediately this was where my new life would begin. Within a month, it became Carter Classic Auto Restoration. I hired 3 young mechanics, eager men who reminded me of myself 40 years ago. Together, we brought cars back to life, Mustangs, Chevys, Camaros, machines that had been written off, but still had beauty waiting to shine. Each restoration felt symbolic, a reminder that broken things could still be rebuilt, that scars didn't mean the end. But it wasn't just about the shop. With part of my winnings, I created the Single Fathers Foundation, a charity to help men like me, widowers, single dads, men struggling to raise children without a safety net. I remembered every night of exhaustion, every moment of loneliness after my wife's death, and I decided no man should face that battle alone. The foundation funded school supplies, housing aid, counseling sessions. The gratitude I saw in their eyes was worth more than the lottery check itself. For the first time in years, I felt free. Money didn't change me. It freed me. It revealed the truth about family. It showed me that blood doesn't always equal loyalty, that love isn't measured by expensive gifts, and that dignity matters more than approval. And so I leave you with this: betrayal will hurt, but it will also open your eyes. Sometimes the people you fight hardest for are the ones who will hurt you most. But sometimes in the ashes of betrayal, you find yourself stronger, freer, and finally at peace. That was my betrayal twist. That was my revenge story. If this story struck a chord with you, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a family betrayal that changed you forever? Don't forget to like this video if it made you think. Save it so you can come back to it when you need strength, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the hidden truths behind family loyalty and survival. Your voice matters, and your story might be the next one we tell.